Welcome to this new episode of the podcast of the Academy of Football Culture. My name is Chris de Wulf. I'm a linguistics professor at the University of Antwerp. In this episode we will talk about live football reporting as a linguistic genre, from Square 7 to Darism, how football commentary taught us to see with words. It does not begin with a goal, it begins with a map. January 22nd, 1927, Highbury, London. Arsenal are playing Sheffield United. The BBC is broadcasting live radio commentary on a league football match for the first time. But there is one obvious problem. Nobody at home can see the pitch. So the Radio Times publishes a diagram of the field divided into numbered squares. As the ball moves, listeners can follow the action with a finger on the page. Square 3, Square 8, out to the left, now the attack. This is a primal image of football commentary, not simply a person saying what happens, but a person teaching us how to look. The commentator becomes a guide, an extra pair of eyes, a voice that does not merely describe the game, but organizes it. A year later, the Dutch-speaking world gets its own football voice. March 11th, 1928. The Netherlands against Belgium, in the old stadium in Amsterdam. Han Hollander is behind the microphone for the Dutch broadcaster Avro. He's nervous, he starts early, and he opens with "Goedenavond, dames en heren." Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, even though it's the middle of the day. But that tiny mistake tells us something important. It's live. The football commentator is not just a reporter. They enter the living room. They speak as if they are sitting next to you, while they themselves are high above the field trying to understand what is happening below.
Van Gelder zwengt naar binnen, geeft naar Bakhuis. Bakhuis lost de schop. Heeft iets te lang nodig om zich om te draaien. De bal verandert dan ook van richting. Het wordt een hoge boogbal. En schitterend stopt Christiaans die bal ondanks de toelopende Van Gelder. En werkt keurig de bal weg. Weer is hij in het bezit van onze voorhoede. Dan is goal! Een prachtig schot van Smit. Eigenaardig, dames en heren, hoort. Nu kunnen we zien hoe
in Han Hollander's voice, you already heard a basic shape of the genre. When the action speeds up, the voice speeds up. When play slows down, the commentator fills the space with names, facts, expectations. Radio cannot tolerate emptiness. A dead moment on the pitch becomes an opening for a story. That is why football commentary, from the start, is more than reporting. It is live language under pressure. Sentences become shorter, names become signals, grammar chases the ball, Janssen, forward, cross, header. The commentator has no time for elegant paragraphs. They build language while the match keeps interrupting. But even before the voice, there was the vocabulary. Football came from England, and the words came with it. In the late 19th century, people in the Low Countries played football with English terms. In a club, with a match, with goals, backs and forwards. English sounded modern, athletic, international. But as the game became more popular, the language began to adapt. Football became voetbal. Free kick became vrije trap. Offside became buitenspel. Referee became scheidsrechter. And yet, the English roots never disappeared completely. Dutch still uses words like club, match, goal, keeper, scoren, dribbelen. Some English words were short, useful, and easy to say. Others were translated because they sounded too foreign, too long, or too English. You can still hear that choice in the mind of every commentator. Do they say corner or hoekschop, penalty or strafschop, keeper or doelman? Football commentary carries the history of the game inside its words. Every term is a fossil. Keeper reminds us of the English origin. Doelman remembers the Dutch adaptation. Spits, a striker, carries the language of attack and battle, because football has always been described as if it were a kind of battlefield. Attack, defense, flank, rearguard, vanguard, breakthrough, pressure. The ball is not just a ball, it is territorial gain. A team pushes up, an opponent is forced back, a player breaks through the line. That military imagery is not accidental. A football pitch is a space with front lines, zones, and movement. You can advance, retreat, surround, regroup. The commentator turns a chaotic moving game into a story of danger and release. And then comes television. In 1937, the BBC shows football on television for the first time. Arsenal against Arsenal reserves, 15 minutes, 3 cameras. Almost nobody owns a television set yet, but the genre changes forever. The commentator no longer has to paint every detail. They can point. Look, there. Television commentary becomes more compact. Radio has to make explicit. The ball comes in from the right, low across the goal, towards the far post. Television can sometimes say only, "Now it's happening." But in Flanders that transition is slow, improvised, and fascinating. The first Flemish television broadcast begins in 1953. In 1954, Paul Jacquemijns appears on screen with a weekly football segment in the program Sportweekend. There is very little footage. Sometimes only a few minutes of one match have been filmed. The rest must be told. There is a wonderful story about Jacquemijns. During one of his first televised football talks, he becomes so absorbed in his argument that he stands up. The cameraman does not follow him. Immediately the director speaks to his ear, "Voortaan blijven zitten, Paul. From now on, stay seated, Paul." It's a small television moment, but it shows a genre learning its own body. On radio, the voice could move. On television, the body had to learn stillness. Out of that tension emerges the Flemish football commentator as a public voice. Journalist, narrator, supporter, teacher, and master of ceremonies all at once. Later, Rick de Sadeleer becomes one of those voices. In 1985, the Belgian player Georges Gruen scores against the Netherlands, earning Belgium its ticket for the 1986 World Cup in Mexico. De Sadeleer shouts his most famous cry that still lives on in Flemish collective memory. "Daar is hem! Daar is hem! There he is! There he is!" That is not a neutral announcement. That is release. The goal is not merely confirmed, it is unleashed onto the audience. You can hear why football commentary so easily becomes a genre, a formula, memory, imitation of the action on the pitch. And yet, good football commentary is not only emotion, it is also restraint. A radio commentator must keep speaking, but not merely fill time. A television commentator must be able to fall silent, but not disappear. They must know when the image is enough and when the audience needs interpretation. Why does a full back push forward? Why does the midfielder drop deeper? Why is a simple pass tactically decisive? In modern football, that task has become even more complex. The language is once again more international. We hear newer terms like pressing, counter-pressing, target man, wing-back, assists, VAR. At the same time, Dutch alternatives remain available. Drukzetten, omschakeling, diepe spits, vleugelverdediger, beslissende paas, videoscheidsrechter. Flemish football journalists constantly move between those two poles. The global football world speaks a lot of English. The local audience wants Dutch that sounds natural. That is why a modern Dutch language match report can sound like a compromise between dressing room, newspaper and stadium. The keeper pakt a rebound na een corner. The keeper takes a rebound after a corner. Half English, half Dutch, and everyone understands it. But if the commentator uses 5 English terms in a row, it begins to sound like posturing. And if they translate everything into Dutch, it sounds sterile. So the history of football commentary is the history of a voice that keeps adapting to radio, to television, to tactics, to globalization, to the audience. From the numbered pitch diagram in 1927 to the millimeter lines of VAR, someone still has to tell us what we are looking at. And perhaps that is the essence. Football commentary does not simply describe a match that already exists. It turns 90 minutes of movement into a story. It gives direction to tension, words to confusion, rhythm to waiting, and a cry to the moment when the ball finally crosses the line.
Universiteit Antwerpen. Bepaal mee de toekomst.